This past Sunday, we looked at a healing that involved deliverance, and we covered a lot of territory. And because that is such a big topic, I wanted to take today and maybe again Friday, I'll send another video just to kind of summarize some of the things that we looked at, because this is a huge subject and we're not used to hearing about it. And so I want to make sure we could give you avenues where you could understand, because the more you are aware of your authority that you have in spiritual warfare, the more effective you will be in fulfilling the Great Commission. But we saw Sunday that just as there are different degrees that we give control of our lives to Jesus, and it's based on our obedience, in the same way we give Satan control over our lives by our disobedience. It's basically the same thing. And Jesus can be Lord of any area of my life that I want him to be, but also Satan can be in charge of any area of your life that you want him to be in charge of. They don't barge in and make themselves on the throne of your heart and king of your life. We have to choose for them to do that. And the more control I give Jesus, or the more control I give Satan, is evidenced by what I do and what I say. It's very obvious of who's in control of our life based on our life. And that's many times based on our obedience and also our disobedience. So we saw Sunday the difference in our relationship with binding and casting out demons or rebuking demons. Now, realize that people can cry out to Jesus and there's nothing Satan can do to stop them from doing so. That's good news. Anybody who is at the depth of their life and wanting to cry out to Christ, Satan cannot prevent them from doing so. He's powerless to prevent someone to going to Christ. And he can try to deceive you and trick you and tempt you to where you don't think that God would ever allow you back into his family, or not back into his family, or be used by him. He'll do so. Now, again, just as Jesus will not violate your will, when you became a believer, you asked him to be Lord of your life and come into your life to be your Lord and Master. In the same way, Satan does not violate your will. He must be asked. He must be wanted to. You've got to want him to be in your life for him to stay. Just as I have to want Jesus to be in my life, you have to want Satan to be part of your life. And the greater degree that Satan is in control of us, the harder it is to say no. It's like someone on drugs. The more involved they are in drugs, the harder it is for them to say no. And it's the same way with other strongholds in our lives. Now, when it comes to binding the enemy, what that means is when you bind the enemy, because you have the authority to do so based upon what Christ has done for us, you're freeing them from the influence of the enemy so they can hear clearly and think clearly. And you're just giving them a little peace of mind, to where if they have to make a decision, if they're fighting this battle against the enemy, when you're binding the enemy, you stop the influence. And that will keep staying that way until that person sins. And when they sin, they take Christ back off the throne of their life. They put self back on there, and that gives Satan the right to come back in, and you start that vicious cycle over and over. So you can bind Satan at any time, but you cannot cast him out unless the person wants him to. But you can bind him no matter what the person says or thinks. You don't need permission to bind the enemy. You do need permission from the person to cast a demon out of that person, because they have to choose whether they want to keep him or to let him go. Now, just as Jesus doesn't violate our will, again, neither does Satan. And so that means, again, you don't have to ask their permission to bind them, but you do need their cooperation of casting them out. And basically what you're doing in binding is you're keeping the enemy from distorting what they think and what they feel and what they see and what they anticipate. And they get a little sense of victory. Hopefully that will be enough for them to keep moving toward closer and closer to Christ, because the closer they get to him, the light drives out the darkness in their lives. That's why whenever you've been either you wake up in the night and you think of someone, that's probably God's way of you telling them to pray for them. Now you can pray for them and never mention the words binding the enemy. And this is the good news. You don't have to have terminology. God knows your heart. I just want you to understand what's happening when you do that, that you can bind the enemy, but you can bind the enemy without saying, I bind you in the name of Jesus. You can say, Jesus, give them freedom, give them victory, let them see clearly and not be distorted by what the enemy does. You can do that and not even use the word Satan or demons, and God will answer that prayer. And that's good news, because it's not a magical prayer. Just like salvation is not a magical prayer. God sees the desires of our heart, and he can answer a prayer of someone, and they may not even understand the dynamics of spiritual warfare. And that's okay, that we can still use that authority and do that and so forth. But that means whenever you pray for someone, you bind the enemy, They have a choice and they can make that freely without any outside interference. Again, when they sin, Satan gets back in their life and you start the circle. That means you may have to bind the enemy hundreds of times in someone's life until they really realize that they want to commit their life to Christ or let Christ be Lord of their life. And most people aren't willing to do that. We're not willing to pay the price of praying for someone until there's victory. We just pray once and think that's all. You can pray one time, but if you have 100 people praying for one person, that's 100 times that person is going to experience freedom from the enemy. And there's a greater chance that they would begin to turn toward God. So the key is having a lot of people pray for someone is not that there's strength, there's in numbers. It's just that gives that person more times to sense freedom and experience God's love of drawing him to themselves. So again, just as God does not override your will, you can choose to make him Lord of an area of your life and fill you with his spirit by your obedience, or Satan will not violate someone's will. They have to want Satan to be involved in their life. He can't make you do something you don't want to do. So as we close out this part today, and I'll pick another one up probably Friday, is that you have authority. And just realize that Satan cannot say no to the authority of Jesus in you. And the more you give your life to Christ in every area, you're being filled more and more with the Spirit of God. The light of Jesus shines brighter. And when you're around people, it must dispel the darkness. So when someone is in bondage, take control over the enemy, bind them, and deal with that person and see if they will turn toward Christ. And you may want to, just like you would ask them, do you want me to pray that you can come to know Christ? You may want to say, do you want me to pray with you so you can cast out this demon, or I can cast out that demon so you can be free from that? Many times they'll say yes. They may not understand what you're doing, but that's when you begin to see God using you as an ordinary person, just like me, an ordinary person, to do extraordinary things. I hope this is helpful. And again, I'll put out another video, a short video Friday to go in more detail in another area of this aspect.